Hello, so this is Helen Rose, and we are talking today about small business accounting, and especially if you are talking about starting up a business, what to consider. So I have brought in our expert in the area, Amanda Johnson from Calculator Bookkeeping. And so, hi, Amanda. Can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Hi, so thank you, Helen, for having me on. So I have been running Calculator Bookkeeping for roughly 7 years now, and I help small businesses just like you guys with their monthly bookkeeping needs. So, you know, it can range anywhere from, helping somebody get a bookkeeping platform established to keeping that going for clients. So, I work with businesses of all different sizes from startup all the way up to, a few $1 million a year in revenue.
Excellent. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. So we have a few questions for Amanda, and we'll get started. One of the first questions I have, Amanda, is so I guess one of the first things that they're doing is trying to figure out what software platform they might pick. And do you have any recommendations or how they go about figuring out what's good for them?
Yeah, I recommend QuickBooks. There's some options out there that are a little bit cheaper. But honestly, like I don't think that they're as robust as what QuickBooks does. There's another option out there called Wave, which used to be free. However, they've just changed their pricing structure in the past month or two, and it's no longer free. Um, I would still recommend QuickBooks. It might be a little bit more expensive, but the reporting that you're going to get with QuickBooks, the ease of use that you're going to get with QuickBooks, um, I say really kind of trumps what you would get with the other lower cost softwares. And I do want to note that QuickBooks does offer uh, a platform or an option called QuickBooks Self-Employed. I always advise people to stay away from that particular platform because QuickBooks doesn't fully support it themselves. So if down the year as you're growing as a business and you need a little bit more robust options, uh, they don't QuickBooks doesn't even support upgrading that into a higher platform. You kind of have to export all your data and start over. So I always recommend starting with QuickBooks Essentials, which is their lowest level normal type of software option.
Okay, very good. So you said QuickBooks Essential, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's about what, about $30 a month?
Yeah, they often run sales on it, so to speak. Sometimes they'll give like 3 months at 50% discount. It really depends on what time of year, whatever their current promotion is. But yeah, it's generally it's about $30 a month.
Yeah. And I know starting out, it can be hard to justify an accounting system, but if if you have enough transactions, you really need a robust um, accounting system, and it will definitely serve you well when it comes to tax time.
Hmm.
So they have great reporting in there. It is easy to use. I feel it's easy to use. And I'm not an accounting expert. I don't do this all the time. I just jump in, when I need to, and I can usually find what I need to do very quickly and easily. It's pretty intuitive.
Yes.
Okay, so another question I have is like how do you have any recommendations on how they keep track of their expenses and their income?
So there's several options. We just talked about QuickBooks. That's for me, that's the top option to keep track of your expenses and your income. Through QuickBooks, you can send out your invoices. You can connect. Most banks will end up connecting to QuickBooks, so that way you don't really have to do anything special. You can just log into QuickBooks, look at your vendors who you've spent money with, and put them towards a category. really makes it very simple. You can run your profit and loss statement from there, which we'll talk about in a little while. So that's really the best option. There are other options out there. You know, you can Google business expense and profit tracking and find some free Excel type resources online. Um, the functionality of those from what I've seen has been few and far between, but you know, that's really the best way to track everything, and being able to look at your profit and loss statement at a dime and know exactly where you stand in your business.
Yeah. And I think even QuickBooks, you can pull in credit card
Yes.
transactions too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And
Bank,
that
checking,
makes life a lot easier.
yeah, checking account, savings account, credit card transactions. You can pull in all of that, and it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah. Now, one thing I would recommend, and you probably, I'm sure you agree with this, Amanda, is that if you have a separate credit card for your business expenses, don't intermingle stuff because then you have a mess.
Absolutely. You don't want to intermingle your credit card or your bank account. You know, that's one of the requirements for compliance as a business owner with the IRS is not to commingle those funds. Um, you know, you're going to want to get a business checking account specifically dedicated to your business. You're going to want to get a business credit card, which at startup might be a little bit harder to get a business credit card directed towards your business, but you're going to want to go that route. That way you can have the separation between your personal assets and your business assets. Um, when you go to do taxes, if you ever get audited, you need to have that separation and prove that that was a business expense and not a personal expense. It's really important.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and as far as merchant accounts for small businesses getting started, um, Stripe is a good option. It does have higher fees, so as you grow, you want to look at other merchant accounts to get those fees down. Also, as I brought up to a group today, that particular they'll hold on to your money for like 4 days, and where with other merchant accounts, you get it the next day. And as you grow, you'll need that money right away to, work with your staff, your vendors, all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to hold up your projects.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
QuickBooks, I was gonna say QuickBooks, you can also, if you're invoicing through there, you can collect your money through them. That's not my favorite option, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They might be a little bit more expensive, but you're paying for convenience. And I guess, yeah,
Right.
I guess you don't have to pull that feed into your system then. But
Correct.
okay, the next question I have is about financial statements. There's lots of financial statements,
Mhm.
but what do you recommend are like the key? What's the key financial statement or financial statements that you recommend they understand?
So the key one, number one, is your profit and loss statement, or it can be called income statement if you're taking an accounting class. Um, with that statement, you can see all of your income and then all of your expenses. And at the bottom, there's a line that says net profit. That's what you actually earned in your business. That is the true judge to the health of your business, because you can be making a lot of money, but if you're spending a lot of money and that bottom line is negative, that's not a great indicator of health for the business.
Mhm. Very
So
good. Yeah, that's the one I tend to be looking at the most. The other ones, um, only when I truly need to, but that's a regular one. And also you can look at that by month, by year to date. There's lots of different ways. By quarter, you can look at it. So
yeah,
it's
one of
a
my
good
favorite
tool.
ways to look for it to help judge the performance of a business, uh, I think it's a special transaction in QuickBooks. I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but I think it's profit and loss comparison or profit and loss by month, something along those lines, where you can put in the month that you want to run and then choose how many months you want to compare it to. So you can get a 6-month look, you can get a 12-month look, and you can see each month as a line breakout as opposed to looking at it as like a big number for the year. So that way you can help identify peaks and valleys in your business, but also, you know, identify what might be working marketing wise or some other method. That's my favorite way to look at them.
Great, thank you. So what is, if they as they're pulling together their day-to-day expenses, you know, operating expenses, what are some of the key ones that some in class I'm going to be going over the typical ones, but what are some of the ones that people tend to forget about?
Merchant fees is one. You know, we just talked about that a little while ago. Merchant fees can vary, and they can be expensive, you know, depending on, and merchant fees are, they take a percentage of each invoice you're bringing in. So, you know, Stripe, you mentioned, Helen, Stripe takes a certain percentage. I can't remember what it is. I think it's 1.99% or something like that. If you're looking at 2% of what your sales are, at the end of the year, that can become a significant amount. And people don't think about that because oftentimes you don't, it's not a physical expense that you have to, you know, give your debit card or credit card to pay for. It's just kind of gone. So people kind
Mhm.
of forget about that expense. Um, another one to watch out for is uh bank fees. You know, if you are working with a bank, which you should be having a business checking account, uh, different banks charge different fees. So some of them are by the minimum balance in your account. Some of them are, I don't think they do this too often anymore. Sometimes it's by transaction that, you know, each transaction that you spend. Um, so that's a big one because those fees can range from nothing up to maybe $20 or more a month. And, you know, it's not a lot of money, but when you're starting out, it can be a lot of money. And that's one of the things I always tell clients to look for. Also, you know, as you're starting your business and depending on what you do, you can need different softwares to run your business. You know, Gmail has a paid version, which I really like. You know, that can be like $8 or $10 a month. There's other softwares that you're gonna try out as a trial for 7 days, 10 days, 15, 30 days, whatever it is. I have so many clients that forget to go back and cancel those trials, and that's money coming off of their bottom line. So being mindful of that as well is one of the big things.
Yeah, there are a lot of software. I mean, we talked about QuickBooks as one, but there's CRM, which I've talked about with my class. That's a customer relationship management software. There's different marketing softwares. There's and there could be all kinds of specialty things depending upon their industry and what they're trying to accomplish. So, yeah, that can add up. We think, oh, it's only, you know, $15 or $20 a month, but every month, and if if you're not using it, make sure you look back at your statement and you see what am I, you know, your credit card statement. Look back and see what you're paying for because you'll be surprised. Like, oh, I forgot to cancel that, and you have to go and go
Yeah,
through the process of canceling that. Sometimes they don't make it easy.
they don't. So you forget your password. We were talking about that earlier. You know, as an example, uh, I had to remote access into a client's computer the other day, and the software that I chose to use for that had a free 7-day trial. But after that 7 days, then it was $60 for the year. That's a lot of money for something I'm only gonna use once. So, you know, it's that kind of stuff that that comes into the business that you really want to be mindful of.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you. Okay. Question as to, oh, since we're talking about uh operating expenses, what about sales? What kind of tips would you give when it comes to like projecting sales and what they should be thinking about when they're trying to figure out their sales?
Yeah. So I was just listening to a podcast on this a little while ago, and the podcast host kind of said, think about profit as a roadmap. You know, you want to get from here to whatever state you're going to, you need to have a GPS to get there. You need to know the directions. And when you're starting a business, you don't know your directions. But one thing that you should keep in mind is you need to price your product or your service appropriately. So, look at what you want to make for a profit for the year and then take account of how much you personally want to make. Because just because your business is making, let's say, $20,000, but you have all these expenses coming out, that leaves your business making $20,000, but you have $15,000 in expenses, that leaves 5,000 for you. Is that what you want to be making for your business to take home to your families and your personal expenses? Um, so once you have that kind of mapped out, and then you need to look at the price of your product or service. How does it compare in the uh, the industry? How does it compare to your competitors? Um, and then that's a good way to gauge how much you should be kind of forecasting in sales for your business.
Mhm. Very good. Good. Yes, getting goals clear and making sure you're paying yourself. So many stars that they don't take that into account. They're like, they just want to make sales. That's great, but how much are you bringing home for yourself? Um,
Right.
we are givers, we are visionaries, but we do have to cover our personal expenses. And often, if we don't, if that's where accounting becomes really key because it can come to a point where you're like, I'm working so hard, I'm making all this money, but if you're not carving out money for yourself, you're not going to be able to continue.
Right.
So
And you bring up a
great.
great point
Okay,
with
then,
that.
and
Yeah, so I was gonna say that, when you're looking at your profit and loss statement, when you're accounting for money that you're paying yourself, that's not considered a business expense. So, you really need to make sure that you can afford to pay yourself as well, because 'cause you're not gonna be able to write that off in taxes as a sole proprietor or an LLC. At that stage of your business, you're not allowed to go on payroll. So it's not a deductible business expense at that point.
yeah, and there, as you grow, there are ways to put yourself on payroll. But when you're starting out, the cost don't make sense, as you grow, do connect with an accountant so that they can advise you at what point does it make sense, because there are times where you might say, oh, it would be good to be a W-2 because maybe you're trying to buy a house, or maybe there's other reasons why it's attractive to be a W-2. You still have to look at the cost of, you'll have additional payroll costs, you'll have additional tax costs. There's a way to be an LLC legally, but from an accounting perspective, be an S corp. We're
Mhm.
not going to go into that right now because that's too complicated. When you're there, talk to an accountant, right? Right,
Yeah,
Amanda?
absolutely.
Yeah, different things to, yeah, it's wonderful to grow. It's wonderful to grow a business and you have new challenges along the way, but it's good to find some great advisors to help you along the way because um, you're going to need them. You're going to need them. One last question I have. Speaking of paying themselves, so when and how should they pay themselves?
So as a sole proprietor or LLC, There's no particular cadence on which you're required to pay yourself. Um, so, you know, I always say, if there's money in the business and you need money for your personal expenses, then it's okay to take it, as long as you're covering all of your business obligations. One of the best ways that I do it, which is kind of obsolete now, but I have business checks. I have checks that came from the bank. I keep them in, there's a little drawer right underneath of here. I keep them right there. Probably shouldn't be telling people that, but you know, uh, uh, I keep different bank accounts for my business account and my personal. I work with two totally separate banks. So for me, the best way to get that money into my personal checking account is to write a check. I know my personal bank, my mobile deposit limit is $600. So I know if I write a check for $600 or less, mobile deposit it, it's going to be deposited within seconds. So for me, that's the best way to do it. It also creates a paper trail of that money going into your personal account. There's other ways to do it. I'm not super familiar with Zelle, but if your bank supports Zelle, that's a way to do it. Um, Venmo actually has a business account also. So I have two different um, Venmo accounts. I have one for like personal expenses for paying friends if we're out. But then I also have a Venmo account for the rare time where I might accept a payment that way. But I have a lot of problems transferring money within the Venmo platform from business to personal. Um, but that could be an option as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can appreciate these new platforms. Um, but there's really not, I feel myself, there's nothing better than a good paper trail with the checks
Yeah.
because you see it in your business bank account, you see it in your personal bank account. I actually take a picture of my check and then I put it with all my receipts. So I have a physical copy as well. So if I ever have any question what this was for, I have this. So it's just really good paper trail. Um, so I think that's a great bit of advice. Is there anything else you'd like to share or add for
I
our students?
Yeah, I would just like to add, like, when you're getting a business bank account, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards the bank that they already work with, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine. Personally, I prefer to keep them separate. Because we have access to bank accounts, just by logging onto our phones. And for me, it creates the temptation just to transfer that money. And going back to our last question, if you do bank with the same bank, then you can do mobile transfers. That's fine. But for me, keeping the business bank separate eliminates the temptation to take money out of my business if I need $20 or $100 or whatever it might be. It's just that line of separation for me.
That's a good point. And also, smaller banks are better for smaller businesses. They are more focused on small businesses and having services for them. You're more likely to get a loan with them. Where the bigger banks, I feel like they just see you as a number and you don't get the personalized service you do with local banks. So I've always, for my businesses, have worked with smaller banks until they were taken over by a bigger bank, and then I'd go move and I'd go to a smaller bank again. I work with Sandy Springs as my business bank, but my personal stuff is in Wells Fargo. I'm like, it's been there forever. I To me, I just leave it there. But I like working with the smaller banks. They're more focused on the local
Relationship.
community
Yeah. And I
relationship.
and I agree. And if we go back to talking about the bank fees that we talked about, those bigger banks like M&T, Bank of America, all of those types of banks, they're going to have higher bank fees. I personally bank with a bank that's more focused in Anne Arundel County called Shore United Bank. Um, I don't have bank fees. I don't have them. I think that they might charge them for some accounts now, but they're more focused. If I need anything, I can walk right into a branch and they're gonna welcome me warmly. Whereas you walk into a PNC or, something like that, you're not gonna get the same level of service.
Very good. I'm glad we touched on that because I think, it's important when they're looking for a bank. Um, and there's so many options, it's confusing. But yeah, I think actually hearing from entrepreneurs and people who work with small businesses to hear that, yeah, go for the smaller banks, even a credit union. I used a credit union for my first business bank account, and they were just wonderful. Yeah, so I've been very pleased with developing that personal relationship with the local bankers because they'll they're more vested in your growth
Yeah,
than say a big bank.
yeah. I would definitely agree with that. And if you're the type of entrepreneur that's out networking in person, you're gonna see those community bankers out there networking with you. You're not gonna see that from M&T, Bank of America. They don't care. But the local community banks are gonna be out there with you guys.
Yeah, and speaking of that with networking, you could get referrals. In fact, I got a referral from my local banker for another business that needed services that I offer. So, I mean, I doubt you would see that from the big banks.
Right. I definitely agree with that.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. I truly appreciate it. So, by the way, so if anybody does need an accountant, small business accountant, or you know of somebody, I'm going to put up your card here. It's Calculator Bookkeeping, and it's Amanda Johnson. So you can find her. She's local here in the area. And so, again, Amanda, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Helen.